Hello everyone and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. As we wind down the year, it is the perfect time to take a look back at 2018 and take a look ahead at what the new year may bring. Joining us now for the annual SUNUP Roundtable are Daryl Peel, our Livestock Marketing Specialist, Amy Hagerman, our Ag Policy Specialist, and Kim Anderson, our Crop Marketing Specialist. Thanks so much for being here today, guys.
Thank you.
Let's start with kind of looking back at 2018. It's always interesting to pause at the end of the year and reflect. And there's always some interesting conversation. But in terms of markets, let's start with livestock and Daryl, kind of your take on things.
Well, actually, I'm going to jump back quickly even farther. We've been, the cattle industry has been in expansion since 2014. 2018, we're waiting for the final numbers, but I'm quite sure it's going to show that we had limited expansion again for the 5th year. Beef production started growing from a low in 2015. It grew in 2016, 17, and 18. So we've had increased beef production this year. And, 2017 we described as a pleasant surprise. Demand was good in spite of that increased production. 2018 is really more of the same in many ways. I've been describing it for many months now as sort of so far so good, in that we know there are things that could be a challenge, but so far demand has been good, and as long as that continues, we're in pretty good shape at this point.
Kim, your take on 2018 in general? I know it's hard to sum that up in a couple of minutes, but just kind of the takeaway.
Well, there's a lot going on, not just in the United States. Our Oklahoma, Oklahoma, we've had some changes in our allocation of our crop acres. We've had wheat acres down significantly, almost 1 million acres if you'll go back a couple years. Corn, sorghum, soybean, corn and sorghum about level on the acres planted and harvested. Soybeans up a couple 100,000. A big increase in cotton acres, around 400,000 acre increase there. And canola's been up and down. Then we've had the political situation. You've got the Brexit, you've got China, you've got what's going on with our soybeans in Brazil, and bringing China again there. So there's been a lot going on in the wheat and the crops. Wheat prices better this year than last year. You've got the corn prices down just a little bit, bean prices down just a little bit, canola prices about the same. So a lot going on in the world and political situation, and a lot of adjustments going on in where the products are being produced, where they're being imported, and where they're being exported. Changes going on there.
And in terms of politics, of course, what an interesting year. A lot on people's minds, especially in agriculture, some ups and downs. An interesting year as policy is being shaped. Amy, your take as we kind of weigh in on a farm bill in that process.
Yeah, 2018 has been an exciting year in terms of the movement that has happened in policy. There's been a lot going on, as you just said. The Bipartisan Budget Act happened early in 2018. It included changes for seed cotton and for dairy, big changes for agriculture heading into the Farm Bill. And then we've had pretty fast movement on a Farm Bill this year, first introduced in the House in April. Versions of the Farm Bill passed in the House and the Senate in June, moved into conference where it's been since September 5th, and just recently the report actually came out of the conference committee and it's going up for a vote in the House and the Senate.
So a lot to digest, and we'll kind of pause right now, but we want to kind of pick up on the Farm Bill in just a moment. But first we want to hear from our friends at the Mezzanette.
Hello, Wesley here with a 2018 Mezzanette Weather Report Summary. 2018 is almost in the books, so I thought we would look at the weather year in review and focus on some record-breaking highlights. Let's start with rainfall. The year-long map through the middle of December shows, not surprisingly, Broken Bow in the far southeast had received the most at 66.3 inches, and Kenton in the Panhandle the least at 14.7 inches. There is a truthful saying that it's not how much rainfall you get, but when you get it. The Panhandle spent over half a year in severe drought that didn't end until late spring rains came. As of February 25th, the entire Panhandle had been 142 days or more without receiving an event with 1/10 of an inch of rainfall. Kenton topped that list with 148 days. In September, we had a mesonet rainfall record shattered. Fitztown in southern Pontotoc County received the highest daily rainfall ever recorded with 14.2 inches. It also set the highest ever 24-hour rainfall period with 14.48 inches from 10 a.m. Friday to 10 a.m. Saturday. Switching over to temperature shows it was an interesting year as well. This departure from average temperature graph shows that we started and ended the year very cool, but had a very warm period in between. April turned out to be the second coolest April ever recorded. Average temperature for the month was 54.1 degrees. This was 5.2 degrees below normal for the month, much cooler than that if you ruled out the Panhandle stations. April also recorded one of the most dramatic temperature swings in our history. Alva went from a high of 101 to a low of 33 degrees in a matter of hours. May was the total opposite. It came in as the #1 warmest May on record. Average statewide temperature was 74.6 degrees. This was 6.4 degrees above normal. The Northwest had temperatures up to 9 degrees above normal. Probably the biggest weather-related event for the year was the wildfires in western Oklahoma during April. Dry conditions, low humidity, and exceptionally high winds contributed to nearly 400,000 acres burning in April. The biggest fire, the Rhea Fire, burned 286,000 acres. It was so large it was easily recorded from space. In August, Mesonet had its 4th station hit by a tornado. The Enola site on the Rogers-Mays County line suffered slight damage from an F1 tornado. Winds were recorded at 84 miles per hour as it passed nearby. 2018 was certainly an interesting weather year. I want to wish you a happy new year and hope that 2019 brings you the perfect weather conditions you need for your farming and ranching endeavors. See you next year on the Mesonet Weather Report.
We're continuing our annual SUNUP Year in Review with our ag economists. And Amy, before we heard from our friends at the Mesonet, we were kind of just starting to talk about the Farm Bill. Let's dive right in.
Sure. So we're going to have a lot of movement in the Farm Bill. In the next year, of course, we'll be coming into a new round of sign-ups. There are some changes that will be there, but not a lot. It's going to be something that's very similar to the 2014 Farm Bill that people are familiar with. There will still be the crop insurance program. There will still be sign-ups for the different aspects of that in both crops and livestock. There will be some changes around pasture and base acreage. There will also be sign-ups for ARC and PLC, which are 2 safety net programs for producers to sign up for. And that means that anticipation on prices is going to be really important, as well as yields in the next year.
And when it comes to prices, we really don't know what prices are going to do. I think we've seen the established bottom as we go out. You know, our prices were down $3.50. We can talk about what caused them when they were $3.50. It wasn't policy, it was the quality of our product. I think if you look at the markets, our bottoms are probably somewhere around that $4.50 level, and of course our tops up are 7 and 9. And what they're going to do over time is just, we're going to have to see what happens with the policy. I liked, you was talking about crop insurance, and I think the crop insurance is one of the most important factors with producers. And so any changes there?
Not a lot of changes in crop insurance. And in fact, in the listening sessions coming into the Farm Bill, crop insurance, they said that's the one thing we want protected. We want to make sure that our crop insurance options are still there. It's something that's used very heavily. So a lot of the options were very heavily protected, and so we expect to see crop insurance. It's very similar to what we saw in 2014.
And what we normally tell people with crop insurance, you can use the crop insurance to protect prices. However, I think when you're looking at production, when you're looking at the markets, you want to divorce yourself from the crop insurance and your policy, your sign-up deals. That's totally separate from, I think, your production, managing your costs, looking forward at prices. And as we look at prices going in where we are right now, we're a good $1.30 or 40 cents above where we were this time last year. And I think the reason we have higher prices in wheat is because we got a better quality. Our average protein for Oklahoma around 12.6, our test weight above 60 pounds. The last couple of years when we didn't have the protein and test weight, we had that below $4 and below prices. We got quality, good milling wheat. We've got the higher price. As you look at corn, we built up stocks. They're coming back down a little bit. Corn prices are really just 50 or 60 cents below what they were in the past. As the stocks change or as production changes, that corn price may change. Soybean prices, of course, we got China, we got Brazil. We could talk a lot about what's going on there, but our soybean prices will probably come up and be higher than they are right now as you look into the next year. But soybean prices are in the tank. And my concern with soybean prices right now is when the U.S. and China come to their trade agreement, that then we're going to have a rush of product on the market and our prices may even go lower for a while.
Daryl, kind of your thoughts on what they've talked about and then where we are in livestock markets as we wind down the year.
We're going to end up 2018 with record beef production. I talked about that increase a little bit. And so we've had those supply potential for problems. Not only that, we have record pork and poultry production. So we're setting new records for total meat production in 2018. Again, the focus has been on demand, and that's really where we end the year, looking at demand. Both domestic demand has been good, particularly from a beef perspective. Even when you look at beef retail prices relative to pork and especially poultry, beef has held up very well in spite of the fact that there's a lot of product on the market in all of those meats. One of the keys to this has been the fact that trade has helped support these markets very, very well. Again, across all the meats, but particularly in beef. We're going to see something around a 12% year-over-year increase in beef exports in 2018. So we're finishing the year with very strong demand. That's been the key. Again, really for the last 2 years, it's held prices relatively steady in spite of the fact that we've got more cattle still out there and certainly more beef production. And that's going to be our focus as we look ahead.
Also helping your beef prices, your entire livestock area is the low crop prices. You've got the low corn prices, you've got the extremely low protein and soybean prices, and so that's getting a lot of help with the profit situation in your livestock industry.
Yeah, absolutely. It's supporting, it is supporting production, but it's supporting cost of production as well for producers. And I haven't had to talk a lot about feed markets in terms of doing market outlook for cattle or for the livestock in general, because we're kind of taking it for granted. There is a lot of potential out there for things to change going forward. There's certainly some big factors out there, but right now feed is not one of those major concerns that's central on our radar screen right now.
And we'll be good unless Amy's policy comes in here and messes it all up.
Well, that's one of several things that could potentially change things.
Well, lots of great discussion. We want to continue this in just a moment, including looking at your analysis and forecast for the year ahead. So more in just a moment.
And every year, as part of the discussion, we always try to catch up with Larry Sanders. And Larry, overall, how has the economy looked in 2018?
Well, we've had a very strong economy. It's pumping right along. Unemployment's about as low as it's been in a while. The economic growth is doing very well, although it started to slow down a bit. And I think if you look back 10 years to where we had the the worst recession that we've ever had since the Great Depression. We have gone through something horrible and come out on the other end about as strong as we ever could have expected.
As we look forward into 2019, what do you think lies ahead for us on the federal and the state level?
Well, I think we're going to see more of the same for at least the first half of the year. There, things begin to get kind of murky. The optimists begin to turn into pessimists, if you will, or at least raise some questions. Economic growth with economists always turn into recessions at some point in time, and we've had one of the longest running economic growth spurts that we've had. And some are saying that we're going to see a recession as early as mid-2019. Some say it's going to be in the latter term of 2019, maybe early 2020. I think we'll probably ride out 2019. What's going to happen toward the end there is you're going to begin to see on the federal level some arguments in the Capitol about having another tax cut to push some economic growth into the economy, and it'll be an election year in 2020, so there'll be some reason to do that, to get that stimulus going. In the long run, that's probably not going to be a healthy thing for the economy, but in the short term, it'll probably be a plus.
How could that impact the agricultural industry across the U.S.?
Well, we have, as you know, seen the net farm income drop by half in the last 5 to 7 years, and there's some real structural issues there. And with the trade wars that have been precipitated in part by President Trump trying to get China to treat us fairly, that's not going to go away anytime soon. And the trade wars and foreign economic growth, those two things are going to be the wild cards that are going to cause us to go into a recession sooner or later. If he can find a way to get us out of those trade wars fairly quickly, we may begin to hold off a recession for a while, and it may help us get agriculture back on the mend. But we've got soybeans rotting in the fields right now. Livestock is not going to be selling like it should overseas. And if we can get rid of those tariffs, get out of the trade war situation, help those foreign economies out, we'll be better off for agriculture sooner rather than later.
Thanks a lot, Larry. It is now almost the new year, so we want to spend the next few minutes looking ahead at what 2019 may bring. Darrell, let's start with you.
Well, you know, cattle numbers I think are probably close to a peak going into 2019. We have to wait and see what the numbers are, but really we're kind of plateauing here. Beef production, however, will continue to grow in 2019, coming out of the larger numbers and bigger calf crop in 2018. So we're going to continue to see that supply pressure in 2019. You know, and not only for beef, again, another record we're projecting at this point for beef production, but also for pork and poultry. So again, we have that large meat supply out there. So we'll be watching demand very carefully, both U.S. demand as well as the foreign demand in terms of the trade picture. And so again, the so far so good kind of thing really hinges on demand. As we go forward, we'll be watching that. There's no reason for things to change necessarily, but there are certainly lots of things out there that could shake it up. We've got a lot of trade uncertainty still out there to be resolved. There's some uncertainty regarding the macroeconomy that could factor in at some point in time more than it has, and so that's going to be kind of the situation as we go forward. You know, I don't see major changes in anything at this point in time, but you know, again, we're going to continue with the same kind of idea.
Amy, your thoughts in terms of where we're headed, Farm Bill wise and policy wise for the year ahead?
So we're going to be waiting on a lot of guidance early in 2019. As the Farm Bill comes out, the guidance from USDA will come out on exactly how those different programs will be implemented. And that's when we'll have the opportunity to make decisions on ARC and PLC signups, and crop insurance signups, just to see how those different changes that have been proposed will be implemented in the year.
Kim, your thoughts? And I know there's going to be a lot of them.
Oh, yeah.
That's okay.
Well, let's start out with what the market's offering for the 2019 harvest. You got wheat, right now you can forward contract for $4.91. Corn at $3.53, that's for 19 corn. Sorghum at $3.50, soybeans at $8.54, cotton at 71 cents, and canola probably somewhere around $6.30. And then you've got sesame and some other crops coming on there. However, we know one thing we know right now is those prices will not be the prices we have. We've got Daryl and his livestock, and how much are we going to graze out rather than harvest on the wheat? We've got Amy and you and your policy stuff. You've got the crop insurance, you've got the price protection, you've got those things that's going to impact the decisions, going to impact can I get insurance for corn or beans or whatever on those insurance things. There's just a tremendous amount of things that can happen in the crop markets and that farmers have got to consider in doing this land allocation and determining whether we're going to go with cattle, what we're going to do on the policy issues. You might want to address some of that.
Well, I don't expect to see a lot of changes in land use in 2019 because of the timing of these policies. So they'll do the guidance in 2019. Really 2020 is when we could start seeing changes in land use based on this farm bill that's being discussed right now. But there is a lot of uncertainty in this year, right? Because you're waiting for the guidance to come out on the farm bill, and what is that going to mean for crop and livestock producers in 2019 as they're waiting to find out what's going to be available to them in terms of disaster protection, in terms of regular price loss protection. We're going to be waiting to see what happens on the trade situation and how that trade policy sorts out as well.
Yeah.
And Daryl, grazing my wheat out by your cattle.
Well, that's right.
Or haying it,
locally or regionally here, we've got those issues of how we're going to use that wheat. Are we going to graze it out? We've got lots of cattle out on wheat this winter, but what we will do next spring will certainly be an issue. Another factor that I didn't mention earlier is in terms of what will be important in 2019 is what happens in China with this African swine fever stuff. How big of a deal is that? Right now, because of the trade disputes that we have, they're not importing as much pork nor soybeans and other things, but they may have to come to the table if in fact this thing winds up being a bigger deal, and that could have implications back in the U.S. Again, in terms of how much of that total meat supply we move offshore, and what happens with pork will impact the beef market, or potentially sure can. So we have to keep an eye on those things.
And that kind of reminded me of what's going on in Brazil with the new land being cleared and being brought into crop production. Also, you're looking at the former Soviet, Ukraine, Russia. They're talking about increasing corn production, increasing soybean production, allocating land resources to that. That's going to impact our prices here in the U.S. And I think, are we going to take some of this cropland out of cropland and take it back to pasture? We brought it into cropland, 15, 20 years ago. Will we see something like that?
Again, all of these dynamics, particularly these global dynamics, things don't sit still while we're in the midst of all this. Things are, producers around the world are going to respond to that, and we're going to see those. It's going to be a different situation when we, conclude some of these political issues, trade issues, and pick it up again. Then it's going to be a different situation than it was going into it.
And Amy, not to interrupt you there, but are we going to get some trade issues there from the policy side, and will policy impact some of maybe land going back into pasture?
I think there's several things that could impact whether or not land goes back into pasture. Certainly trade and the impact that's going to have on commodity prices and is going to be part of it. But then also there are some changes in this farm bill that affect pasture production. For example, the base acres that are on pasture land, they're going to stay as base acres, but they're not going to receive payments if that land is in pasture. And that's a pretty sizable change for some of our producers who have been used to receiving commodity payments.
A lot to think about, lots of terrific discussion. As we wind it down, just a final few thoughts from each of you. I like to end this way every year. Takeaways for Oklahoma producers to set them up for success in 2019. Kim?
I go with my usual. You're going to make a profit by managing cost. I think we've got some new production practices on nitrogen applications, especially for wheat. You've got to produce a quality product that the market wants to buy. We've experienced that over the last couple of years with wheat, where we had poor quality wheat and an unacceptable price. Once we have a quality product, and I think keeping costs down with timely nitrogen and fertilizer application and managing our costs, I think that's where it's at.
Amy?
A lot of information is going to be out there in the next year regarding the Farm Bill and also trade policy. So just keep an eye on the news, keep informed, and keep in touch with your FSA agent and your county extension agent.
And Daryl?
Yeah, I don't expect prices to change a lot. We've been kind of on a plateau here, so I tell producers, continue with your plans. Don't change your plans. I think within the cattle industry, we're kind of, we're okay right now. We're kind of in balance, supply and demand in a broad sense of the word. Those external factors could be important, as Amy just mentioned, so you got to keep an eye on those, and you might think about what you might have to do if those change, but I wouldn't change your plans at this point. Prices are at a level where if you do manage cost, as Kim advises, from a livestock production standpoint, there is profit potential for most producers.
Okay, terrific. Great discussion. Thank you all so much for your time and for your assistance and guidance on SUNUP throughout the year. We really, really appreciate it. And that will do it for us. And thanks so much for joining us. And we also want to say a special thank you to our colleagues and friends at Oklahoma Foundation Seed Stocks for letting us spend a little time in the warehouse today. It's been great. And to all of our viewers from us at SUNUP, a Happy New Year, and we'll see you again soon.
Happy New Year, everybody.